Dawson's Rambles.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Ryder here. Welcome to another character ranking video for Power Rangers. You know, some of these I'm basing off of inspiration from Once and Always, as I did one for Rita, and since we got a new version of Alpha in the form of Alpha 9, technically two versions of Alpha in the form of Alpha 9 and Alpha 8, which are basically Alpha 5 4.0, but I thought it would be fun to rank all the versions of Alpha. Now, there's a chance that I maybe forgot one, or again, maybe there was something in a video game or like the Paper Cuts comics, but I'm only ranking all the ones I have experience with. So let's go ahead and get started, shall we? So, coming in at the bottom of the list, which is almost not even one that should be on here, but I'm just going to mention because it exists, but is what I think is Alpha 4, which is that Alpha you just see in a box in the basement of the command center. Again, this is almost more of an honorable mention. Obviously, it's not even a character, but hey, it exists and I've seen it. Next up, for the real bottom of the list in terms of ones we actually get characters of, is Alpha 7, which is the one from Forever Red, which is basically just not even a different Alpha. It's just using one of the same suits and has, you know, the same voice. It's just there to be like, hey, here's a new Alpha. A lot of the Alphas, like post 6, are like that, unfortunately. But this one literally I felt like was in a scene, so there's not a lot to talk about. Then I'm gonna go for Alpha 6 1.0. I split Alpha 6 into two characters because you have the yo yo yo, and then the one that was like normal. This one I almost ranked a little bit lower because I'm not the biggest fan of the yo yo yo. It was annoying, it was dumb. It feels like the earliest version of like the hey my fellow kids meme, like them just trying to appeal to the youth. And I still don't like it, but admittedly, it's like funny in retrospect. It's one of those things you can go back and laugh at how bad it is, you know, like Toku itself. No, but I mean, it's just one of those things where, again, it's not my favorite, but it can be funny to laugh at how absurd it is. And I was just recently rewatching some of the last episodes of Hyperforce, and Malika brought in the Alpha 6 voice, which I forgot about. And it's like, yeah, that's funny to look back on, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of that choice. Then you have 1995 movie Alpha, which again, in these lists, when there's a 1995 movie version, they're usually at the bottom because, again, repetitive if you've seen those other videos, not because they're bad, but because there's no differences to their characters. They're just like a different design, so there's not a lot to talk about. But fortunately, I find Alpha 6 annoying, and Alpha 7's not really a different version at all. Alpha 5 from the movie is basically just Alpha 5 with a slightly different design. But I like the different design, and I like Alpha 5, so he gets a bit of a higher place on the list. Then we have Alpha 8, who really doesn't get a character. Both Alpha 8 and 9 are just Alpha 5, and I truly don't know why we didn't just make it Alpha 5. Like, we could have just brought him back. I know he was taller, but who cares? Regardless, though, and like I'm just saying, if they were going to give it the same voice, what's the point? Anyway, I'm off it for sure. The thing about Alpha 8 is, not a lot of character to him, but he's got a cool backstory, where he becomes Rita. Like, he gets possessed by the pure evil essence of Rita's spirit. That's just a cool story. And I gotta feel bad for the guy because no one really mourned him. To be fair, he's just a can opener. But Alpha 9 was like, oh, my poor predecessor. And Billy's like, whatever, I don't give a crap. Alpha 10's already on the way. And guess what? He's also Alpha 5. I doubt this would happen, especially since they blew him up. And, you know, any chance of survival would happen with Rita's spirit. But it would be cool to have Alpha 8 actually become a villain that wanted revenge for how much of, like, less than a crap they gave about him. Speaking of, like, them all being the same, after that is Alpha 9. Again, disappointing that it was basically the same character, same voice, but I enjoyed Alpha 9 for what he was. You know, he had some funny lines in the movie, or the show, or whatever you want to call it, and I enjoyed him, and he had more character than Alpha 8 because he had more to do outside of being possessed, since once Alpha 8 was possessed, it was basically Rita, but I enjoyed Alpha 9. Then we got our classic original recipe show Alpha next on the list. I always like Alpha, you know, the original Alpha. I always have a soft spot for him, obviously, from growing up with the show. You know, he could be funny and endearing, sometimes annoying. You know, had a pretty cool design for the time, especially on the budget. And I overall will always have a soft spot for him, but obviously there's versions of the character I like a little bit more. Again, I don't know why they didn't just bring him back for this special. I don't know why they didn't keep him around for, you know, post-Turbo also, because I feel like they were doing a lot of changes and they'd want to have a little bit of a comfort character there, but yeah, I always will have a soft spot for this version of the character. However, I decided to rank just above original recipe Alpha 5 Comic Alpha. I was trying to decide like whether to rank like one or the other higher, just because arguably I have more of an emotional attachment to Alpha 5 from watching the show all those years, and just, you know, getting a better feel for the character, getting to hear the voice and the performance and all that jazz. However, Alpha 5 in the comic is basically the same character, but he has more to do. You get a little bit more backstory and context, and he's done a little bit more, such as, wearing that cool like Blue Ranger armor suit in that one story. So I'm like, yeah, they're basically the same character, but as always, the comic ones get a little bit more to do. So I had to rank the comic version a little bit higher. And you got Alpha 55. I really enjoy Alpha 55. If you don't know, Alpha 55 is from Hyperforce. We do know what Alpha 55 looks like because there's been comics and drawings and stuff, and it's basically a black gold Alpha, which is something I immediately like because I'm a sucker for a black gold color scheme, and there's technically a toy for it because there is a black gold pop vinyl, which I've been meaning to get, and now the price is kind of redonkulous for a pop vinyl. But anyway, it's clear that Malika was probably just trying to do like an Alpha 5 voice, but because she can't replicate it 100%, it comes across as a different variant, which is kind of rare amongst the Alphas, and developed its own unique personality and dynamic with the team, with being helpful, even having like a cannon in them, and especially the best thing about the character is the dynamic with Vesper. Some of my favorite moments include Vesper trying to use Alpha for parts when they needed weapons, Vesper always thinking Alpha was like a secret like enemy, like there was times where something would malfunction in the field and she would be like, Alpha! Or probably my favorite is when Vesper and Alpha shared a body, and for a brief time, only Vesper could hear Alpha's thoughts, and Alpha's like, oh, tell the Rangers I'm here, and Vesper's like, quiet, I'm in charge now. It just made for a really entertaining version of the character that wound up standing out amongst, again, a lot of these are so samey as we loop back to sort of the same core personality in the show ones. So even though I think they started with that, I think it evolved into something that was clearly inspired by the core of Alpha, but became its very much its own thing that fit in with the Hyperforce series. Now heading into our top 3 is the 2017 movie Bill Hader Alpha, which I think is super underrated. I enjoy Bill Hader, so I knew I was going to like this version of the character, and recently rewatching the movie, I forgot how much I liked this Alpha too. And he was actually not prominent, but he was in the movie way more than I remembered, and he was really enjoyable, he was really funny, he had some actual significant parts with helping the Rangers train, like setting them up to fight the putties and like showing them this wrestling move that they actually wind up using later. I think it was in the Megazord, which is really cool. Not to mention, I really like the character's design. I think it's a really cool reboot spin on Alpha, where it takes sort of the core like principles of Alpha, but makes it very alien looking with the idea of the saucer, this almost like globe looking thing that reminds me of Men in Black with the eyes. I really dig the hell out of this version of Alpha. Again, like with a lot of the movie stuff, disappointed we'll probably never see these versions of the characters again. At least in live action. Give us an ongoing comic series, boom. Runner-up is Alpha 1. A lot of you might not know what Alpha 1 is, but that is the original Alpha from the comics introduced in Go-Go Power Rangers, which is underrated as a comic. One of my favorite comic characters, actually. I'm not the biggest fan of the stuff they're doing currently as of this recording with him working with Rita. Not because he's working with Rita, but because some of the motivations I feel don't line up with like where his character was introduced, but this is not about that. I just generally like the concept of his character in terms of we fleshed out some of the mythology behind it. I love the design. It's kind of monstrous and like archaic, which is kind of cool. Not archaic, you know what I mean? Like it looks older, like older tech, and they lean into that with the monster vibe, which is cool because it's like, okay, this is an older version, but also, it leans into him being evil. But his whole thing is he basically is like, Zordon's a half measure, why don't you just kill your enemies? And I think he's kind of like the Punisher, but it was Alpha in a way. But it brings up this really interesting moral debate. He's an interesting character I don't entirely disagree with, since the Rangers literally murder their monsters. They murder all their villains. Then why not just murder the higher-ups? Because Rangers don't murder. You know what I mean? It was an interesting character, interesting debate, and the idea of Zordon's first Alpha being a villain, super cool. And probably is the most, deep character of all these. Like, all these characters aren't really characters. I would say the only two that feel more like legit characters are this one and maybe the Bill Hader one a little bit. However, for me, number 1 is Alpha 6 2.0 from In Space / Lost Galaxy when the voice box got fixed to give us a version that was reminiscent of Alpha 5 but slightly different. For me, this is just my most nostalgic and fond version of the character, as In Space is my favorite series, and I always just liked this version. It was like refreshing to get back to a version I liked. There was something I also liked about this Alpha just going through a lot with the Rangers, having, made it through the command center destruction and going up to space with them. And this Alpha also always had a very warm personality that I don't know, there were just like sweet moments, like the episode when Astronema switched places with Ashley and he was giving a gift. Also, I always saw this version of Alpha as a girl, but that's neither here nor there. Regardless, this is mostly based on nostalgia and fondness, but this is kind of the version of Alpha I think of when I think of my favorite show, Alpha. Despite it kind of just being, again, the voice I think was just meant to be like, let's just do Alpha 5 again, but this one still felt distinct. Like, I feel that there's, within the show, three distinct versions of Alpha. Alpha 5, which is basically Alpha 5, 7. No, did 7 have 5 or 6's voice? But Alpha 5, 8, 9, and then Alpha 6 1.0, Alpha 6 2.0, which is my favorite. But what are your guys' favorite versions of Alpha from throughout the Power Rangers multiverse? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell so you get notifications for my videos. Dawson Ryder, signing out.